Nope, nope, nope. I'm never going to space. Never, ever, 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 ever. Hello everyone, David here with my review of the movie Gravity. Gravity stars Sandra Bullock and George Clooney as two astronauts. One of them happens to be a medical engineer who need to learn to survive after they become stranded in outer space. And that's the thing about this movie. The story does not get any deeper than that. It's more of one of those kinds of movies that evokes more emotion rather than telling a very intricate story. It's more of a movie that gives you a premise, and then after that it expands that premise by bringing in new experiences and new obstacles that these characters have to overcome. That's not to undermine the characters as well as their respectful actors. Brian Stone and Matt Kowalski, played by Sandra Bullock and George Clooney respectively, they're very likable characters, and they have to be in what I deem to be called a bottle movie. A lot of people call them, these kind of movies, bottle movies, in which one, or sometimes like in this case, two characters are stuck in a particular situation where they really can't go anywhere. They're stuck in this place with this situation, and they spend the majority of the movie, or him or her or they spend the majority of the movie stuck in the situation trying to get out of it. A more recent movie that did that, actually two recent movies, was Ryan Reynolds in Buried, and James Franco in 127 Hours, the movie where he got his arm stuck between the boulder and that canyon, and the whole movie deals with him trying to get out of it while at the same time trying to reflect back on his life and the mistakes that he made and that sort of thing. This movie is the same way, in which you got these two characters stranded in outer space trying to survive while at the same time trying to cope with the situation, rather than telling very deep backstories about these characters that didn't need to be there, because otherwise if they were there it kind of would have ruined the experience, because then it would have gone just a little too deep. Instead, they just gave us little details to make you like these characters. That way, when something happens and they're put in a perilous situation, you genuinely care. And Sandra Bullock and George Clooney were great in these roles. George Clooney, however, he's kind of George Clooney the astronaut in this movie. I mean, he's smug about his looks, he's telling these stories about these women that he's been with, but much like what I'm hoping George Clooney to be in real life, when the shit hits the fan and a very catastrophic situation undergoes, he takes the lead. He takes initiative and says, okay, this is what we got to do. This is what you got to do. You got to relax. You got to stay with me. We got to focus and try to get ourselves out of this. And because of that balance of humor and authority, you really like this character, despite the fact that the role was clearly written for George Clooney, and he fitted that role very well. It's just that there's certain moments where, I'm not going to say it took me out of it, but I did feel like I was just watching George Clooney in an astronaut suit. But again, he was not bad. Sandra Bullock, on the other hand, in my opinion, was amazing. There were certain scenes in this movie where she had me, and she just tugged on my heartstrings indefinitely. And I gotta be honest, I'm gonna go ahead and say that I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if I hear her name come Oscar season, because I genuinely think that she will get her second nomination for this movie. And what I loved about the performances is the fact that they made me change my mind about their casting. When I first heard that Sandra Bullock and George Clooney were attached to be the main protagonists of this movie, and then after seeing the trailers and such, I thought to myself, I think this was a bit of a studio decision in which they casted these A-listers, these A-list actors, to be in this movie so that they can obviously market this movie and have a better appeal for the movie at the box office. But now, after having watched the movie, I think the actors realized that, so they said to themselves, if we're going to be in this movie and we're going to be the main appeal of this movie, we might as well deliver great performances, and that's practically what we ended up getting. But what makes this movie amazing is, like I said before, not trying to go ahead and give you such an intricate plot, but rather than to evoke emotion in you. And an awful lot of facets about this movie try to get that emotion out of you to make you feel like you're going through this experience with these characters. Different characteristics of the movie, from the sound or lack thereof, because something that I loved about this movie is the fact that, obviously, scientific fact, there's no sound in space. There's absolutely no sound. You can't hear anything. So I love that they actually went ahead and withheld some sound effects when things are happening. Like, for example, some object would crash into another thing and make it explode in space. And when that happened, I was expecting there to be like a or whatever. So I was expecting it. But it hits it, and you don't hear anything. You don't hear that sound effect, and in my opinion, I found it to be way more effective than an actual crashing explosion like sound effect. So I really love the realism there. And what I loved even more about the fact that there was no sound effect is the fact that it let room for the score. The score for this movie is absolutely breathtaking. It's riveting, it's chilling at times, and then there are other moments where it gives you goosebumps in both, yeah, in either a suspenseful way or in a very inspirational way where you're rooting for these characters, and the score really helps out with that. And I wouldn't be surprised if that gets nominated at the Oscars as well. And the cinematography is amazing. The visual effects are great. Granted, the majority of this movie is CGI, like 90%, like maybe 80 to 85% of this movie is visual effects, but they become invisible after a while. That I didn't even, well, I wouldn't say I didn't notice them, because me being a film buff that I am, I know for a fact that what I'm looking at is a CGI painting of sorts. But the fact that I was becoming so invested in these situations that were happening, and I was at the edge of my seat, made me believe in that computer generated imagery. And let's not forget the wonderful direction of Alfonso Cuarón. This is the guy who did Children of Men and what is perceived by many to be the most loved Harry Potter movie of the franchise, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And I do enjoy it. It's just that, I don't know, it's kind of difficult to choose which one is my favorite out of the Harry Potter movies. But I will say that Children of Men was just wow. And of course, an awful lot of his characteristics as a director carry on over, such as the long tracking shots. The first 10 to 15 minutes of this movie is just one complete shot. Now, granted, it is a little easier to do considering the fact that, like I stated already, the majority of this movie is CGI, so not an awful lot of physical camera work is involved in terms of creating this one-track shot. However, what does come into play is the choreography, because that first 10-15 minutes felt like a dance with different characters, because we start off with 3 characters, I'll tell you that right now. But having them float in one particular area of the frame, and then having the camera pan over to another character, and then zoom in on another character, and then again, taking this and combining it with the visual effects and the cinematography is just masterful filmmaking. I give my kudos to Alfonso Cuarón for just making just a breathtaking movie, both technically and both in a technical sense and in an artistic sense, because it takes an awful lot of craftsmanship. I said it right. It takes an awful lot of that to just hit all those points correctly. And combining all these elements makes for such a claustrophobic movie, because I find it very ironic that this movie takes place in outer space. This whole, vast, entity, whatever. This vast open space, mind you. And I just felt like I couldn't breathe, especially during the POV shots. I hated the POV shots, not because they were bad. They were just again great shots, filmed very well and displayed very beautifully. But I hated them because every chance they got, they would cut to a POV shot, a point of view shot of Sandra Bullock inside of her helmet. So you see like the little heads up display. You see the little her breath, the vapor from her breath being put on the glass, on the whatever the helmet. And having all this stuff happening before her, whether it be her spinning around in outer space as she's drifting, you saw that in the trailer, or just debris is hitting a station and you see all the catastrophic things happening right in front of her, while at the same time everything moving about while she's floating out in space from her perspective. It made me dizzy, but in a good way, where I'm like, man, I just can't take this anymore. And I just like her, I couldn't breathe because it felt very real. And I will say that the 3D was really good. Now, I won't say that it's a bit of a requirement to see this movie in 3D, because I feel like it would have been just as great if I had not seen it in 3D. But I will say that the 3D did amplify some scenes. Not the entire movie per se, but there were certain scenes where, like I stated, some debris is involved. And I would be lying if I did not flinch more than 5 times. I was like, aside from that, there's also other shots where they just take a moment to just pan across Mother Earth. and just show her in all her beauty. And I would, again, I would be lying if I didn't say that the 3D really did bring out that image forward and make it a little bit deeper to capture the beauty of this shot. And there's another shot where you see Sandra Bullock drifting into space, but you can only tell that it's her because you see the darkness where you don't see any stars, so you can kind of see the silhouette of her body just drifting away while you have all of this, just, you know, stars and space behind her. And man, it just feels like the depth of field for that shot was just great. And it made me scared. It genuinely made me scared because it felt very intense, as did the rest of this movie. If I had any nitpicks, I would say that every now and then there was something that would happen, mainly because of the trailer. It's almost not so much the movie's fault as it is the trailer. From the trailer as well as the TV spots, there were certain things, one in particular involving a character. I'm not going to say what it is, but there was something that I saw in the trailers and the commercials where I said to myself, something tells me that this happens with this character. And I saw the movie, and sure enough, that thing happens with that character. Now, when that happened in the movie was actually later than I had anticipated. I was actually thinking it was going to happen a little more early on in the movie. But it happened later on, and I'm kind of glad it did. But I'm not going to say it was ultimately predictable, because it could have gone either way. Especially the little twist that they do, well, somewhat twist that they do at the very end, where I'm like, wait, did they? Maybe they didn't. No, I don't think they did. Or maybe they did. Despite that, however, I kind of saw that coming, and sure enough, it did happen. So I guess that particular element was telegraphed just a little bit. But it's a tiny little scratch with this movie. This movie is only 90 minutes long. It's only an hour and a half. But it felt like almost 2.5 hours. Here's the thing. You can say that either as a negative or as a positive. As a negative, it would be that this movie dragged on way too long. You know, it was slow, it was boring, it should have been cut a little bit to fit a better running time. Or you could say it in a positive manner, which I will do with this movie, in which it evoked such emotion and it put me in the situations the characters were in, and it was such a tense and terrifying situation that when it was going on, it felt like, you know how when you have to deliver a speech in front of your class and the teacher says you only have to be up there for 5 minutes. 5 minutes. But when you're up there, it feels like 10 or 15. This is how this movie felt. It felt like a very long movie, but in a good way. In a way where it made me genuinely be part of this ride. While at the same time making outer space one of the most terrifying things I've ever seen on film. I'll have to say that Gravity is the Jaws of outer space. You'll never want to go out there, ever. Not even when NASA finally achieves tourist, buses or tourist shuttles up there, where regular people could just go up there without the extensive 6, 9, 12-month training to be able to go up into space. No, not even that. But needless to say, this is probably one of my favorite movies of the year. I give Gravity a 9.2 out of 10, which is an A-. And for those of you who have been thinking that maybe Sandra Bullock is getting a little old, watch this movie. As soon as she takes off her astronaut suit, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.